Hello, everybody. This is Two Queers in a Truck. It is Wednesday, May 25th, and it's Jenny Gunn and Christian Cano. Almost
Hey,
live.
Boo.
Hey, Boo. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Long time no see.
A long time, about 15 minutes ago.
Exactly.
But anyway, I've thought a little under pressure considering we're talking about elections or primary elections that happened not only here but in other parts of America, and
Okay.
and I think some interesting things happened, and we definitely need to address them because I believe we'll dive right into it. But I think we saw some tremendous new trends and some change that obviously is on the way. So we'll talk about the local flavor first. We had our municipal and our county primaries for both of the major parties, for the Republican Democratic Party. And we had, and there's no other way of saying this, we saw several notable almost incumbents like that are holding office, but we're changing office, and we saw a former office holder on the city council that did not win their election bid or their primary bid, and most notable Jennifer Delahara, Larkin Eggleston, and Billy Madeline, and they both were some of the top fundraisers in their category.
Yeah.
They were all three. Jennifer Delahara, of course, married into a Peruvian family. Her ethnicity is white. Larkin, white, and Billy Madeline, white. And I think two of the most interesting things, I think we saw white candidates not do so well locally.
What do you think?
I think a couple of things. I think the winds of political change are happening in North Carolina. I think we saw that play out in the early part of the build up to the Senate primary, especially for the Democratic Party here in North Carolina, where we saw a former Supreme Court justice for North Carolina get out to an early lead in polling and just never let off the gas.
Even though the white guy announced before her.
Correct. And early on raised a lot of money.
Yes.
Which we're going to get to him here in a minute.
Okay.
All right. Different category. But I think what we're seeing is we saw the beginnings of it in 2020. And I think it even goes back to 2016. We saw a tremendous amount of racism coming from the Republican Party. I think we saw a tremendous amount of racism and race baiting over the last 6 or 7 years, post Obama.
Sure.
And I think locally, we saw the George Floyd riots and protests the last couple of years. I think it's changed people's expectations in a couple ways. One, that they are looking at candidates of color, and especially female candidates of color, and even LGBT candidates. Because the one that beat Billy, for example, in the primary was also an out of the closet candidate. So Billy and Dante, for people that aren't local, District 1 in Charlotte is officially called the Gayborhood District. It has a disproportionate amount of LGBT people living there. So Dante, that beat him by a considerable margin in a district race, is a out of the closet lesbian, also a woman of color, very accomplished, MIT grad as well.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And so two very qualified candidates. And there was a third candidate that was not an out of the closet candidate. That is a heterosexual woman, but also a woman of color. And the two women got more votes than what I'd call the establishment candidate of Billy Madeline. Wow. It's a former city council person. And
so you think that one of the reasons is because people are just tired of white candidates, or just what's your thinking?
It's as simple as that. I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's complex.
I think there was a lot of reasons. I know in the Billy versus the Dante deal that their campaigning strategies were very starkly different. Billy, for example, relied on his ability to buy large amounts of media, lots of signs, and did a more traditional retail type of candidacy, which he didn't go to a lot of events. He didn't do door-to-door canvassing. Actually went on in the month of May and April during the primary early voting season. He went out of town 2 weekends in a row instead of going door to door.
That's interesting. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And Dante's candidacy was very grassroots, she'd raised a considerably less amount of money. And I had the fortune and the insight of being able to interview them for Quality North Carolina's PAC. So they told us their strategies and their processes. They're both very qualified. I think Dante used a more I'm going to the people type approach.
Grassroots kind of thing.
And very, very, very in person. They canvassed very hard. Also, Luana Mayfield.
Luana Mayfield.
She did a tremendous amount of grassroots. Did not buy signs even because she's studying sustainability. She went a very, very hands-on approach. She said that the doors that they knocked, the thousands of doors they knocked on and her team knocked on, really appreciated that. And she really, and also ran on her accomplishments when she was a district city council person for 8 years, and the many things that she accomplished during her previous tenure. And so I think there was a tremendous thing that was said that the people that did win ran on a very personal level, a very hard charging level.
Yeah, grassroots.
Yeah, exactly. And they got rewarded for that.
And you think, and what you're saying is, if I understand, I know we got to go to the next one, but the other ones that lost seem to have just run on
money.
More
what I call retail conservative. Not that they were conservatives, but they ran a very conservative approach because Larkin was campaigning style was very similar to Billy's, and so was Jennifer Delaharis. And I think they tried to run on name recognition and a big budget. And did not necessarily, especially in local elections where you can go out and especially in a district race or even a large race, you go out and meet a lot of people in the months leading up to the election.
Good point.
And I think because Larkin announced so early, he had a year and a half, as that article that you sent me today.
He should have been pounding those doors a year and a half.
He had a year and a half. And he did. What did he do? The next subject is a part two to the local flavor. I think accomplishments and stability matter.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, I think in a very tumultuous time when we're talking about COVID, you're talking about a pandemic, you're talking about international and national instability with the war in the Ukraine and so many other things. I mean, we're running out of baby formula, I mean, things like that. I think people are looking towards people that project the stability. And on this one, I'm pointing out three candidates that won their primaries. Pat Cotham, Arthur Griffin, and Dimple. And I believe all three of those candidates had a tremendous amount of accomplishments. They also have a tremendous amount of stability. And Dimple's running into a new race, but she's been on the job for a long time. And has done very well in her district. Has done a lot of high profile movements in the city government, and ran a very hands-on campaign. Is always shown as a very stable person, a very matter of fact, very analytical person. I think she got rewarded for that. Arthur Griffith is a legend in this county. Former school board member,
former school board president. I think
all kinds of things like that. And since we had a local controversy about our schools versus the BOCC, the Board of County Commissions, and that's what he was running for this time was the county commission. I think his reputation as a consensus maker and expert on education, that he's been in that business for almost 50 years, put him as a stabilizing force on a county commission that needs somebody like that to keep from happening what happened last year, which was a very controversial thing. And I think Pat Cotham, she's just been there for a long time.
She's the hardest working elected official that I've ever met.
Yeah.
Second to Mark Gurl. Mark Gurl is
and she's very hands-on, like Mark Gurl.
Yeah.
And she was the top vote getter in the county commission race or in the primary. So I think you saw three people that have a high work ethic, high hands-on reputation. And I think the voters, at least in the Democratic Party, said, that's what we want. We want experience. We want stability. And I think the voters also said, we want people in color in charge. We want the optics of people of color, but we also want people with experience, good resumes. I think that's why many of the choices that were made for two reasons. One, that we had a ton of qualified candidates of color in the Democratic Party that ran for local office, which I think is very exciting. The fact that we passed on to two out of the closet women onto the city races, which I think is phenomenal. That doesn't exist anywhere in the top 20 of the United States. And I think it'll be the first, if they do go on to win their offices in the general election in July, I think we would be the only top 20 city to have two out of the closet women on the same city council, which would be huge.
Do you think, hey Jen, for those who are listening to us in Charlotte, you kind of know what we're talking about, but the viewers who aren't from here, they probably have an idea of what we're talking about. I agree with you, Jen. It does seem like the citizens and the voters are just looking for people who look like them. I
think it's part of it. I think where it started, though, too. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think
that's fine.
I think it's a referendum.
Yes, you did.
But I think also, too, I think that's why a lot of people voted for Biden.
Yeah.
Was his blue collar roots. He's been a stable force in American politics for 50 years. He's like that old uncle that that's going to guide the ship into the bay after having the crazy uncle. Hold my beer, watch this.
Yeah.
Whether you like Trump or not, he was a very unstable person. He's a very erratic person, a very controversial person. And then you have a Biden that's the boy that stuttered. Hey, they came in and stabilized our country and said, hey, I'm the voice of reason. I'm not going to be perfect. I already acknowledge I'm not the perfect candidate.
Yeah.
But I'm the stable one.
You know what, Jen? Let me tell you what I don't know this, and I'm not sure anybody's going to do any theory. We had some candidates on our other show, the Coffee and Vanusa show. We had on our politics show. We had some judges. We had 4 judges. 2 of them were running against each other on the Democratic ballot. 2 of the white men were endorsed by the Black Political Caucus. Their person who was running against them for one of the seats in a judgeship were Black women of color, and the women won. The women of color actually beat the men who were endorsed by the Black Political Caucus. I actually think when you're looking at judges, and it's a very, very important position, there are people who are thinking, if I have to go in front of a judge, I want someone who may be a little bit more sympathetic. And I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think that maybe something that they consider?
I think they also too. I think women in politics. I think these tides are changing.
Sure.
And I think we'll come back. We got to do a break real quick, and we'll come right back, and I'll finish what I was about to say.
Hey everyone! Thank you so much for watching us on Two Queers in a Truck. Don't forget, you can watch us anytime at your leisure on our video podcast platforms like Facebook and YouTube. But you can also listen to us, either this show or any of our past shows, on our audio podcast platforms like Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and all of the other ones. So once again, thank you for watching Two Queers in a Truck. I hope you enjoy our show.
I think with local judges, and I think a lot of people don't know what a local judge does,
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people look at women judges nowadays in 2022 and in the 21st century, and they realize they don't have the same prejudice that they had against female lawyers and female judges in the past.
Sure.
That it wasn't that long ago. There was a lot of law schools that didn't even allow women to go to the law school. In fact, Texas, UT allowed the first few women in the 1970s. So it's not been a long time that women were even allowed in certain parts of the country to even go to law school, much less be a judge.
Sure.
And so I think you're seeing a dynamic, one, that people are wanting to vote for more female candidates, more queer candidates, and more candidates of color, whether they're Asian, whether they're Black, whether they're Latinx. I think you're seeing that shift some because of the makeup of our voting blocks. But I also think, too, that people are going, white people have had, especially white men, have had this country for 245 years.
Yeah.
And look where we're at. Are we in that good of a fight? And I think you saw somebody like Biden, for example, that nominated a half Asian, half Black woman, first woman of color to be a vice president of the United States. I think you're starting to see, Biden's commitment to women of color. You saw his first nomination out of the deal, historic Black woman. First Black woman on the Supreme Court. I think.
Hey, Jenna, I have a question for you.
And we do have to go on to our third topic real quick.
Okay.
Too. But ask the question. So the 14th versus the 11th, and we're talking about the congressional districts, the primaries. We talk about
here in North Carolina.
Here in North Carolina, so the 11th district that has the incumbent Madison Cawthorn that lost. And then we have a brand new district, 14th district, that borders on the city of Charlotte. It goes west to a county over. And that our local guy won the Democratic competition against another candidate, another Democrat for the primary. And so Jeff, our local state senator, and so
actually he's my senator.
In fact, he's
my state senator. I've never seen him, but he's
but he's still your senator. And I think it's interesting in both of those races, because those districts kind of rub up against each other just a little bit, is that you look at a Madison Cawthorn that was so controversial his entire 2 years in office, but also here lately, some Republicans took exception to some of his comments, and of course generated all the sex tapes and the controversial takes and the pictures of him in women's lingerie, versus another white male that couldn't be any different. Served in the military, actually graduated from multiple colleges, an attorney here in town as well, a state senator that's done pretty well in his career. He's not been perfect, but he's not been controversial either. He's not been posing women's lingerie as much as we joke. He's actually a pretty stable guy, and is probably what represents his district fairly well, and whether you like him or not. And so, two contrasts geographically about the same area, and how Madison Cawthorn made national news, and Jeff Jackson, that's kind of a low-key guy in certain ways, barely even a blip on the radar. And so I thought it was very interesting how Americans think and what Americans cultivate or what they want out of their media. And I think it's a strange contrast that two district races like that for the U.S. House of Representatives couldn't be so different. Like there was no controversy in the 14th, and the Republican or the Democratic side super quiet, it was almost a foregone conclusion that Jeff was going to win that primary. Because he outspent his competitor probably 100-1 too.
Sure.
And whereas the 11th made probably national and even international news. I mean, there's probably people in London, England are going, what's going on with this Madison Cawthorn dude, and why is he in women's lingerie? And so I think it's one of those things that there isn't really much analysis there. I just think the disparity between those two side-by-side districts couldn't be any different.
Yeah, I would disagree.
How so?
I actually think that Madison Cawthorn and Jeff Jackson are not that different on their need for celebrityness. That Madison Cawthorn really was all, I mean, there's different because actually Jeff actually can legislate, you know what I mean? So yes, but Madison was all about, he wanted the celebrityness, the new Republican, they want to be a celebrity because they're not really, that's the only thing they can be celebrity. They're not really good at sports. They're not good actors. They're not good singers. And so the only way they can become a celebrity in America is to go into politics. That's their path to notoriety, or social media person. Jeff seems to be, I know you and I have disagreed with this, from the time he was first elected to that Twitter thing that he did during the ice storm, where that's where he became real famous and popular for people who follow him. And he really counts a lot. If you read his stuff, he talks a lot about his social media following and so forth. And so I do think that they both are very attracted to that celebrityness. The problem that I have, or the challenge that I see, is Madison Cawthorn. It came back to bite him in the butt because he represented a rural area. And they basically said, I don't want somebody who's a celebrity. I want someone who actually is more like the type of people we've had in the past. Jeff represents a small part of our if he wins, he'll be representing a small part of Charlotte. I'm in his district. But he's running like in the 12th district, which represents the majority of Charlotte. The voters who are in our rural area, they don't like that celebrityness. And my concern is that Jeff is going to be so focused on the celebrityness, he's not going to get the votes out in the rural area. And so this is Jeff's election to lose, right? Jeff has to lose this race. The only way he can lose it is if the rural Democrats don't come out with any excitement, and the Republicans do, and the Democrats in my district don't come out with excitement for him, they could actually beat him if he doesn't be careful. And so I do think, and just one more thing, because I know you want to go to the next topic. I wish someone would talk to Jeff about buying a suit and wearing a suit. And this is the reason I think, Jen. Remember we had Mark Gurl on our other show about a year ago or 2 years ago, and we talked about how black and brown candidates, when they go in front of white audiences, you have to look professional or they don't take you seriously. You have to go that extra effort. What people don't understand is the same rule applies reverse. If you're a white candidate and you go in front of a black church or a Latinx church or whatever, they expect you to wear a suit. Right. Because they want you to look professional as well. Jeff, that rolling up your sleeve, Beto, Obama kind of look that he's going after is not going to work in the rural area because he doesn't have any street credit. He's from the city. He's trying to look rural. And so one of the concerns that I have is this casualness that he has is going to come off as very disrespectful to the black and brown community because, first of all, he's very young. So he's got to convince these older voters that he is not, some millennial kind of individual. So that's the concern that I have. And so, and I don't know if you're going to agree with that or not, but I do have that concern that Jeff may not only may he lose his election, but he could bring down the Democratic voters that we need to come to the polls to offset the Republican situation. And so I do hope that Jeff watches this, and I do hope that someone watches this because this is really his election to lose. And if Jeff just sat at a Waffle House in Gastonia, he would realize that what he's doing doesn't connect with him.
Well, first of all, probably didn't want to do the Waffle House thing because that and it blew up in their face.
That's right. That's right.
So we would pick a different restaurant. I did want to jump on Justice Beasley's race versus just really quick. You really have Justice Beasley versus Trump. It was a Trump endorsed candidate that did win, and Bud versus former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Beasley, that very clearly by last December we knew she was going to win her race. Whereas the Trump candidate versus the former governor, it came down to the wire. It was a very close race, and it was not decided till the day of. And probably one of the closest races in North Carolina. Because Pat McCrory was a very well-known governor, even though he exited because of the bathroom bill, the anti-transgender bathroom bill. And then Bud, of course, had the Trump endorsement, which just hasn't necessarily helped some candidates around the country, as we're going to talk about later in the show. So it's going to be very interesting, the matchup and the polling data. They're pretty close right now. It's probably going to be more settled here as we go on down the year, depending on how they spend and all that. But clearly, Sherry Beasley, former Supreme Court Justice Beasley, has had a great track record in North Carolina, has won statewide races. And I don't know if the Trump endorsement on a long haul is going to help back when it comes down in November.
I don't think, I think you're exactly right, Jen. I don't think that the Trump endorsement is as important in these people winning elections as he wants to think. And I think there's a lot of other reasons why people didn't vote for Pat McCrory. First of all, the HB2 thing, and there are Republicans who didn't like the HB2 thing because it devastated most of our economy during that time period. Companies that didn't want to move here. And so there were Republicans and unaffiliated people that actually may have voted Republican just to make sure McCrory doesn't come back. And so I think some of it may have something to do with that. That's what I was going to tell you about the Larkin thing as well. Oh, sorry.
So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll segue to that. So a quick commercial break.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching us on Two Queers in a Truck. Don't forget, you can watch us anytime at your leisure on our video podcast platforms like Facebook and YouTube. But you can also listen to us, either this show or any of our past shows, on our audio podcast platforms like Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and all of the other ones. So once again, thank you for watching Two Queers in a Truck. I hope you enjoy our show.
And we are back. So I do agree that I believe sometimes on spending money and endorsements sometimes don't help. We're seeing that in Pennsylvania, which
Larkin had all the endorsements except the Black Political Caucus, but
he's been on the city council with a pretty good track record. He was instrumental in the NDO passing. He was one of the leads on that. He's done some high profile things while in office. So it wasn't like he just sloughed it off for 3 years and didn't show up to anything. He was relatively well liked. He didn't really have any negatives or controversies attached to him. And just kind of, in general, he wasn't brutal.
I know what you mean. Yeah. He wasn't
he wasn't
like Tariq.
And he was, and in general, he wasn't somebody that had huge strikes against him. He was also well known. He also raised a tremendous amount of money.
So why do you think that when people decided their top 4 people, because that's what the top 4 are gone, why do you think he wasn't the 4th? Because if you look at how people voted, Smudgy was not the top 4 in a lot of people. You could tell Braxton and Dimple were the top on everyone. Then you had Luana, and then Smudgy was last. And then just a couple thousand was Larkin. So why do you think people didn't choose that 4th one? They had to make an effort to not vote for him and vote for someone else or not vote.
I think, for one, when you're talking about the top 5 for the city council at large.
It's 4.
But Larkin was the 5th spot. I think when you're talking about that top 5, they all either had served on city council or currently serving on council.
Mhm.
So they were all household names.
Sure.
They were all well known. And I was really just thinking, I think the top three,
Mhm.
a lot of people said universally, these are our favorite three.
Okay.
And I think they flipped the coin on Larkin and Smudgy.
Yeah. It was like, they were going back. Yeah.
But Smudgy had just left office.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, especially in the Black community, they like him a lot.
Yeah.
He's very well liked. He's
charismatic.
Kind of guy. He's a very charismatic deal.
Yeah.
And, I think that was just enough. He was a candidate of color as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, because the top four were all candidates of color.
That's right.
I think the Black turnout was very high comparatively. I think because it was not a very controversial city council election, there wasn't a lot of pushback against the city council at large candidates. There was not really an awful one in that top five. And so, I think a couple things worked against Larkin was the fact that it was kind of historical that all four Democrats are people of color. I think that was a huge thing. I think they all were equals in notoriety to Larkin. And I think that's why he lost such a close, the difference between fourth and fifth, like you said, was only a couple thousand votes.
Yeah, it was like 2,000, I think. It was
if you just took just a few hundred votes from each district.
Exactly. Each precinct, you flip those and
everybody knows who Smudgy is and everybody knows who Larkin is. But if the turnout was just a little bit higher in those districts amongst voters of color,
do you think
Smudgy real well?
Question, and I'm sorry to throw us completely off topic. Do you think the fact that Larkin voted for the RNC came back to haunt him? Do you think there were Democrats that were paying him back?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think people forgot about that.
Okay.
I think if that would have hurt anybody, it would have hurt the mayor. And I think the mayor did not have an opponent that was notable.
But is it possible that people wanted to take it out on the mayor and they couldn't, so they took it out on Larkin, and they wouldn't have taken it out on Julie?
I never heard the scuttlebutt, amongst voters. I never heard anybody say, "Well, I don't like Larkin." I don't think it was the fact that Larkin wasn't well liked. I think he's well liked. I think just Smudgy was just a little bit more well liked, and that's why it was so close. I think now, if between fourth and fifth place there was a 10,000 vote spread, for example,
then
like there was in 2019 where we saw Jorge miss out the fourth spot by a considerable margin. So actually, it was a surprising margin that he lost by. I would think, there was something wrong with Jorge, or something. His candidacy just didn't cut the mustard for whatever reason. Obviously, it didn't, because he lost. But there was a considerable margin between him and who made it on. And so I think it was really just a flip of the coin for that fourth spot. Everybody had, I think, a solid amount of people had that top three. And the top three vote getters all got a considerable more votes than Smudgy or Larkin.
I can tell you,
got voted in as back.
I can tell you, in this household, two of us did not vote for Larkin because he said, "If you like my vote me out," and we and we did.
And you agreed, I think Larkin was just one of those good old boys that just ran the wrong race, and he just didn't check the tea leaves of politics close enough. I think that's what happened to Billy. I think that's what happened to Jennifer. Is their timing sucked. I think people are demanding more from their candidates. I think in Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte, they're demanding more. I think they want diversity. I think, especially in the Democratic Party, the values is the only big tent party that really demands and asks for diversity. I think you're seeing it in the Democratic Party, the fact that we have a woman of color as our state president and chairperson. I think you're seeing, I think our national state senator nominee, almost from the moment she started to run, the moment she announced till the actual primary, she's led from wire to wire. She was never behind any.
I was very I was very impressed. I saw one of her commercials this weekend, and the Republican Senate committee, they've been running these really nasty attack ads against her even before they knew who their nominee was. She actually released a commercial combating that and saying they've said these lies and this, and she got some data. I'm so glad that she didn't just let it go, that she confronted it. I know you can't apply to every commercial, right, but at least it showed she's willing to fight back. You know what I mean? And that's good. Yeah.
I've met Sherry Beasley, Justice Beasley, in 2020, right before the pandemic, and there's a lot of fight there. Right? She's going to give the Republicans all they can handle, and then some.
Hey, can I ask you another question? Do we have time?
We actually have to move on to the sixth segment,
okay,
and then
go ahead.
Let me go ahead and throw it out there.
Okay, all right.
Merging trend in the Republican Party: Trump versus Pence, or Trump versus the courts. Which will get him first? Mike Pence, over the last few weekends and last few months, has methodically not only distanced himself from Donald Trump, but is also actively campaigning against him in many states where he's endorsing the opposite candidate of Trump in some cases, in some select cases, especially in the Midwest. Pence polls very favorably because he was the governor of Indiana. Versus Trump versus the courts that may get him in it may be moved for 2024.
Exactly.
He's ineligible to run, between January 6th, the New York AG and a bunch of other courts that have his number, and allegedly he's committed a lot of different crimes. What's your take on who do you think will beat him, Mike Pence or the courts?
Well, I think the courts are. But I just find it very interesting that I just don't visualize Mike Pence as like a fighter. I can see him like being one of those really passive aggressive, like, I know you're. I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, at least Lindsey Graham's got a little bit of Queen in him, where he's.
I think Mike Pence has got a big old hair. I mean, people would say that for years, including people in Indiana, like he's a Trump.
Hey, that's what we said. That's what we said.
Family money.
He's our first openly gay. He was our first gay senator from the South. So
I think Pence is a big old queen. Especially anybody that calls his wife mother. I mean, just like this gives off Norman Bates vibes. It's like dead hookers in the basement vibes. Like it's just creepy. Mike Pence is. Well, I mean, he's a creep.
Yeah.
I mean, the anti.
Yeah, he's
a creep in his policies, but he's creepy.
Yeah.
And not because he's in the closet for being gay, but just his creepiness.
Not there's anything wrong with it.
No. I mean, he should come out. I mean, everybody knows it. Nobody cares. It's the least of his problems, truthfully. I mean, but you were going to ask a question. Really, I just do the sixth kid.
A couple of years ago, when Trump was running, and it's 2016 to be specific. One of the things that I noticed, and people started noticing, especially progressives really noticed this, is Republicans were saying, Trump or whoever, they may be an ass or a dick, but at least he stands for something. Remember we talked about that?
Yeah.
And then we talked about how Democrats, sometimes they don't come across as standing for something. So Democrats are mad too. I think Brandon and Dimple's victory, the top two, are perfect examples of Democrats also want people to stand for something. Because Dimple is very clear about what she thinks about climate, about a lot of things. She's on the forefront of those. Brandon, social justice, and all these kind of things. Braxton, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry.
Hey, I think you're thinking of. I think you were mixing Brandon Lofton with.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
But his name is Braxton.
So I do think that we're seeing. All politics is local, and what you see locally starts to spread out. I do think that one of the reasons that people like Justice Beasley is because she I hope she comes across as standing for something. You know what I mean?
I think for one, I think she has a tremendous intellect. I don't think you become the Supreme Court Chief Justice in the state of North Carolina and not have some very firm ideas about yourself and where your career wants to go. So I think she'll be good at defining that. I don't think she's just going to run on who she is ethnically or the fact that she's a woman. I think I think that won't hurt her. I think in some ways when the Republicans run their attack ads, I don't think that'll help them because it's going to make them look vicious and mean going after a woman. And I think a lot of Southerners, no matter how they vote, don't particularly like seeing women get attacked. I think
exactly.
So I think despite North Carolina having a lot of racism, they also have that weird Southern. Well, you know, you're supposed to be chivalrous. There's that chivalrous side of Southern people that just don't like to see a woman get bullied, no matter how rotten they are. And
the ones that don't mind it would never vote for her anyway.
Correct.
So they're not going to be so they're not going to be persuaded anyway.
I think I think you're more independent moderates, which there's a lot of them in North Carolina that would be persuaded. I think, which I hope. I think the Republicans are going to be ultra aggressive with it. I do think that's going to be the downfall. I think that's going to be the margin of victory. Because
someone like Barbara, who is one of our co-hosts on our other show on Coffee and Fondue, she doesn't like those commercials.
Correct.
And that's she would, and people, like that. I agree with you. I think that's going to be.
I think the swing in here is not going to be bring the Democrats to the polls, because I can just tell you the Democrats are fired up, especially with Roe versus Wade being in the balance, which should be, sometime midsummer is when that ruling is supposed to come out. So it's going to be 4 months ahead of the general election in November. So they're already fired up. So what we're going to see is those moderate women, no matter what their ethnicity is, and I think two things. I think Roe versus Wade is going to have a big impact on Justice Beasley's race.
Okay.
Because you're talking about a black woman versus a white conservative man and a Trump. And Trump's the one that switched the court from being progressive to moderate to hardline conservative wackos. And that's going to allow to overturn not only Roe versus Wade, but potentially marriage equality, transgender health care, and many other body autonomy issues that are coming down the pipe. There's already lawsuits coming up in federal courts deciding all those, even interracial marriage and birth control. Contraceptions are being challenged in courts as we speak. On different levels, whether there should be allowed as corporate benefits. There's several lawsuits being waged in state and federal level, but regional court battles as we talk. And so I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of issues come up between now and November when you're talking about the SCOTUS, and Trump is responsible for those because he put 3 of those justices on there. And I think women, especially female candidates, may see that 5, 6, 7% more votes than typically would, like in 2016, where women did not universally support Hillary. Because there wasn't anything hanging in the balance that was a major women's issue. We're looking at now, we're seeing a 50-year-old ruling being overturned, and many women, many cisgender are also gay allies as well.
So, hey, Jen, are you suggesting that the candidates who are running on the top of the tickets, and in North Carolina, Cheryl Beasley is the top of the ticket? And usually the top of the ticket drives people. If it's a president, if it's a governor, and then you go down the ticket. In North Carolina, you have the federal races on your ballot. You have your senator, your congressperson, and then you have a county commission, and it goes down, and the judges, unfortunately, at the very end. So fortunately, in North Carolina, Cheryl Beasley is the top of the ticket. So what you're saying is Cheryl Beasley, because of she's top of the ticket, is going to be driving. I really agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in the states where you have female candidates, whether you have a governor's race in the midterm, like a Georgia, I think it undoubtedly helps Stacey. I think in this state with Sherry as our highest ranking, highest profile candidate running versus a Republican upstart as well, and then also being tied directly to Trump. Yeah. I think whereas it helped him edge out McCrory in the primary, it's going to backfire in the general, because all Sherry has to do is tie what they've already publicly consummated. So you literally, she doesn't even have to say anything negative.
Just use their own words.
Is say, well, Trump's the one that put 3 justices on there.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't even have to say anything negative about it. She just has to.
I agree. It's between Sherry Beasley and Trump.
Yeah, she is, and I think you're going to see that all over the country when it is a Trump endorsed candidate versus especially a female candidate or any candidate of color. Because so many people of color have been affected by Trump's words. I think that's going to kill those candidates. And we're seeing that in Pennsylvania, because we did skip the 5th topic, which is, I call it the recount Wizard of Oz in Pennsylvania. Right now, as they're counting votes, they're almost at the 1,000 mark or under in the difference between McCormick and Dr. Oz on doing the Pennsylvania laws. If somebody wins by 1,000 votes or less, it's an automatic recount.
Sure.
McCormick is pushing. There's several thousand undated ballots that don't have a date. They were mail-in ballots that he's pushing, and he's solicited all 67 counties in Pennsylvania to make sure those undated ballots get counted. Dr. Oz does not want them counted because he's currently leading by a little over 1,000 votes and does not want to recount at this point. Now that could change. But McCormick's attorney and McCormick have sent letters to the 67 voting bureaus in those counties.
I read, this is Wednesday when you're seeing this. On Monday night, McCormick sued. He filed a lawsuit to get that done. I think that happened like 5 o'clock on Monday. So, yeah.
And when I researched it, it had not quite happened yet. So obviously, but he was already indicating that he already lawyered up and at that point in time. So that's good to know. I think, according to every article I saw, that this race is not going to be settled for at least 1 to 2 more months, which is great for Fetterman, that's the Democrat nominee, and gives him more fuel to go, hey,
exactly.
These two are fighting it out because they can't figure it out. This is what you're going to get if you don't like it.
So hey Jen, isn't it so interesting that when the guy won in Virginia, you remember the governor, when he won in Virginia, all the Republicans were saying, you see, this is proof that people, but they gave us how we could beat them. And they said, but the reason he did it was because he distanced himself from Trump.
Right.
The only way you can win is and so they're telling us the candidates that are endorsed by Trump and that are running with Trump in states like North Carolina and other states, it's going to hurt them. They told us that. So they're telling us.
And also, too, it was a very narrow victory, for one. 2, Virginia flips and flops between Democrat and Republican control for the last 40 years. It's been a perennial swing state, and it swung that other way in 2017. So it it wasn't like California, whereas in California's deal, and I always compare Virginia and California because they did that recall election against Governor Newsom.
Sure.
And Governor Newsom obliterated the 20 or 30 Republicans that ran against him by a larger margin than his last general election, and undoubtedly was a huge vote of confidence because, for one, they have a $50 billion surplus in their coffers. California has been wildly successful economically. They were wildly successful in navigating the COVID pandemic. And the voters said, yeah, we love who we got. We don't want a Trump coup. We don't want another, celebrity candidate like a Arnold.
Yeah.
We like, even a lot of the Republicans in the bigger cities were like, Governor Newsom is so bad. We're not going to say it real loud.
Yeah.
But Governor Newsom's a lot like our governor here in North Carolina. Is that Governor Cooper and Governor Newsom are very hands-on, very good managers of their state. And they've been very successful in bringing new industries and new jobs to their states and balancing the budget.
Hey, Jenny, what you said was exactly what I think some Republicans have forgotten, and sometimes we forget in general. An elected office is a job.
Correct.
And a governor, a mayor, you're basically a manager.
Correct.
And so when you elect someone who does not have any managerial experience, like Trump, you're going to have a shit show.
Yeah.
When you have someone like Dr. Oz, you're going to have a shit show. And so you need people who at least have held office so they understand how to manage people and so forth. And I think, I just think that sometimes we forget, especially Republicans, they just like to elect loud celebrity people. Like no one, who would hire Marjorie Taylor Greene or Laura Bobbitt or whatever her name's, Laura, and Madison Cawthorn or even Matt Gaetz? Who would hire them?
But Madison Cawthorn didn't even have a job before.
Exactly.
The only job he had was that he was his well-known politician dad's son. He made it one semester of college in that small private school in Virginia. He never got into the Naval Academy. He has had one objective failure after another, but he was well known enough in where he lives, and because there was no well-known person up against him in that district, he was able to eke out a win. Yeah. And because people just didn't really know who he was per se. Yeah. Now that he revealed who he is a horrifically bad Republican representative. Even Republicans in that district are like, he creeps us out. Like he just is unhinged to the point, and his opponent was competent enough to win.
Hey, Jen, what do you think about him saying last Thursday, that the dark MAGA is going to be released, and it's like, I'm going to pay the people back who are, who was trying to fight. What do you think of that?
Well, I think we saw it get released in one way because the MAGAs actually clapped back on him. I think whatever he's got and whatever he released, obviously he can go scorched earth. He's completely ineffective in his job that he currently has for at least a few more months. And whatever he says and whatever he releases will just reinforce why he got fired. Sure. I mean, to me, I'm all for him releasing dirt.
So am I.
I personally like the fact that he didn't get renominated. Yeah. Only because I want to see him go scorched earth, because he has he's never going to be able to win another Republican nomination again. Like he's done. He maybe the mayor of Asheville or something. I don't even think he could win that.
It's a Democratic.
But he's just stick a fork in him as far as running for office again. He's never going to hold another office in the Republican again. So he might as well. So what I would say to him is, hey, boo, not only welcome to the LGBT family, forge a flame on. Just like the Fantastic Four with the fucking dude, just flame on you, just scorch them, just burn it all down. You might as well. you might as well
Yeah.
be well known for that because you're
Exactly.
mayor as a human being and as a congressman. So do it. I would absolutely 100% endorse that.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
All right.
I think it'd be great. But we are quite a bit out of time.
Yep.
We probably ran about 10 minutes over our promised time of 30 to 40 minutes. So it's been a great show. We've spilled a little bit of tea. Hopefully we had a little fun with it and shed some light on some local elections. And kudos to all the winners of the Democratic
Congratulations.
Party. And never a kudo to any Republican. Anyway, this is the end of Two Queers in a Truck. We'll leave out with a little music like we always do. And as we found, some people crumpled under the pressure.
Bye, y'all. Bye, boo.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for watching Two Queers in a Truck. Christian and I will see you next week for the first week of June. Be safe. There's a lot of crazies out there this weekend. Bye, y'all. Bye, boo.
Bye, boo.